everyone. So I want to make just a quick video of my testimony. I feel like it's something that I just really want to share. And if you're new here, my name is Carleen. I am married to C. John, who I usually make videos with, and we have 3 kids, Mila, Zion, and Legend. And we share a lot about minimalism, and I've been incorporating a lot more of my faith into my videos now because I feel like that's the biggest part of me and I want to share it with you guys. So I feel like I need to make this video for myself, but also if it helps one person, then it was meant to be. And my friend Stav did a testimony video and I loved it so much, and I thought I want to share mine too. Mine is going to be pretty brief, but let's get into it. So I was raised in church my entire life, and it was more so I was forced to go to church. I didn't like it. I was raised Pentecostal, very strict, very scary. At least in my church, it was a lot about fear and warning you that you're going to end up in hell, versus we never learned about a gracious, loving God. It was always like, fear God, do this, don't sin. Like, it was a lot of fear instilling, and it created such an anxious and depressed child in me. And as an adult, when I've struggled, my mom has had that aha moment. Like, the signs were all there. Like, she knew I was struggling since I was a kid, but she was new to the faith too. And just, you know, back then, therapy and things like that were not really like talked about. So my parents did the best that they could. But we're gonna skip all of that, and we're gonna go to finally when I was around 18 years old, after a really bad divorce that my parents went through. I found Jesus for myself. I was in such a bad place. I was so sad about my world being like turned upside down with my parents' divorce that I started to seek something. And you know, when they say you can't fill a God-sized hole with anything but God, it was so true, because I was trying to find anything to numb the pain. And honestly, until I went to church and until I started to believe on my own and kind of learn, I was just empty. So that's it. I became a Christian, and I want to say for a whole decade, a little longer, I was a lukewarm Christian. So I loved God, I thought I knew God, and I thought I was a Christian. But I will say that I didn't really know God. I knew of him, what I learned at church, but you can't say that you fully know God when you don't know his word and you don't know a lot. You know, I would just kind of rely on what I learned on Sundays and say, that's enough. You know, I didn't read the Bible very often, and I didn't live a life that was pleasing to God. I kind of got stuck on the whole pursuit of happiness versus pursuit of what God wants for my life. I didn't always listen to what his plans were. I just kind of made my own. And I didn't do anything bad. Like, if you looked at me and you saw my life, you would never think, oh, she's living in sin or she's doing something wrong. But I knew that it wasn't the life that God is calling me to live. So we're going to go forward to last year in 2022. Well, actually, I need to go back a little bit. COVID was the beginning of the end for me with anxiety. So I had been anxious for a long time, and I, in 2020, had a really hard time with the whole COVID thing. I was pregnant, I was stressed, I was scared. There was so much unknown, so much arguing. All I cared about was that me and my baby were gonna be okay. And that isolation and all of that did not help my mental health. And then I had a kid, and then I went through postpartum depression, not even realizing. And then we bought a house, which was a lot. And then we, you know, went through like renovations. So our life was like kind of all over the place. And then I ended up with severe anxiety and depression. So my therapist believes that I was kind of trending downward for years, but then the whole moving and my life being uprooted was when I actually hit rock bottom. So last year now, 2022, around July, I knew I needed to make a change. I felt very stressed out. So I actually let go of social media. I actually downgraded to a flip phone and I loved it. But then I just wasn't getting better mentally. I thought maybe it was social media and all of that, but it wasn't the thing that was hurting me. It was, I really needed therapy. So in October, I ended up having severe anxiety to the point where I had to go to the hospital. And then, long story short, I felt like I really needed God. And so I started looking for a church. I found one on a Saturday night. I was so desperate. I needed to go to church. I needed just to be in the atmosphere. I thought I was going to die. At my worst, I started to question if my kids would be better off without me. And the scariest part was, I can't even believe this, but I asked my husband one day if he thought he would be better off without me. And of course he's just like, whoa, 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 like what's happening? And I'm just, that was my rock bottom, questioning my own worth in that type of way. So just to give you a little, understanding of where I was mentally, I felt like I was a burden to everyone. I felt like my depression and my anxiety got in the way of a lot of things, because there's a lot of things that I wouldn't do because of my anxiety. Like even go to a birthday party. I just didn't want to be around people because I was so anxious, or, it was just a lot. So, okay, sorry if this is kind of like all over the place, but I went through that really, really hard time. I remember one day I stood in my car for 8 hours and cried the whole time. It was so bad. My friend had asked me if I wanted her to come over here from Orlando. So she drove 2.5 hours just to be with me and get me out of the house, which was probably the nicest thing anyone has ever done for me. Like, she was so intentional, and she took me out to dinner and we went to the mall, and I wasn't mentally okay to be anywhere, but she made sure that she was there for me, and that's something I will never forget. But that night we went to a restaurant and I got a margarita, and I was still crying and I was still really sad. And then I got another margarita and I still felt really sad. And then a third margarita, I started to feel okay. I started to feel like, all right, I don't want to cry or throw up right now. I'm okay. Wow, 3 margaritas, this is great. And I didn't have a fourth because the third was like the good spot, right? But then the next day, I was like, I want to go get margaritas again. So I went to dinner with my husband and my mom, and I got a margarita, but I got a huge one, right? And I was like, this one's good, but I want to get the ones that I had the other day. So then the next day, I asked my husband if we could go out to dinner so I can get margaritas. And I noticed on day 3, I drank 3 days in a row. I said, oh no, I'm trying to numb the pain with alcohol. I hadn't drank alcohol in 5 years. My husband was employed at a church for 5 years that did not allow its employees to drink alcohol. And it's not a debate or anything. It's just, yes, you can drink if you're a Christian, but you do have to be careful. And it was just, I think it was a good thing for the church to do, because you never want someone in the congregation to like see you out or like think that, I don't know, like people have their own battles and you should set an example. But anyway, so I hadn't drank in 5 years. So me wanting to drink 3 days in a row was a little bit scary, and I already have an obsessive personality. So I'm like, this could go really, really south. Like I could end up becoming an alcoholic because it feels good to numb my pain. And I'm sure that's how a lot of people start. So on that 3rd day, I decided that I would never drink alcohol again in my life. Mind you, I've never, ever had an issue with alcohol. That was 3 drinks in the last, at that point, it had been over 5 years because he quit in 2020. So it'd probably been like 7 years since I drank. But the fact that I wanted to drink 3 days in a row because I was hurting so bad, that was a red flag for me. And I'm like, no, this is not the person I am. I'm hurting, but no. So I made that vow to never drink again. And I'm so glad I did. I still haven't drank. But I was not going to let myself go down that path. So I cut that really quick. I was afraid of what could happen. So I'm like, I'm not coping with alcohol. What's next? So then what did I do? I decided to go to therapy. So I go to therapy, and therapy alone was great, but it's still, my base level for anxiety was still like a 10. So my therapist recommended that I get on medication because of a lot of factors. One of them being my heart felt like it was going to explode every single day. I couldn't function. I couldn't be a good mom. I couldn't be a good wife. I was just trying to survive. And it got to that really, really low place. So I decided that I would do medication, and I saw my doctor, got on medication, but it took a very long time to kick in, like 5 to 6 weeks. So in that time, I was doing therapy. I was getting out the house more. I was taking medication, and I had an emergency prescription of Xanax. And I didn't take it a lot, but it was to get me through until the medication kicked in, because I literally could not function. So then I decided, I don't know, I'm desperate, I need something. So I tried to find a church. I ended up finding the church that I go to now. I walked through the doors, and I could have gone back to my old church, but I wanted to go somewhere where I didn't know anyone, because I was not okay. And I didn't want to talk to anyone that I hadn't seen in years, because we stopped going to church in 2020. It was now 2022. So I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want anyone to ask me if I was okay. I didn't want to have to worry about how I looked or how I was presenting myself, or if I had a not great face on. And because come on, if you're going to see people you haven't seen, you're going to try to look nicer or smile a lot. I couldn't. I did not have the mental capacity to do any of that. And I needed that to be okay. So I wanted somewhere where I could just go and just, they say church is like a hospital for the hurting. That's what I did. So I went, my kids loved it, but I had to take a Xanax just to walk through the door. And I cried the whole service. And then, which is crazy because today's December 20th, and 2 days ago was our year anniversary at our church. And it's one of the things that helped save my life. And so the next time we went to service, again, I had to take a Xanax to walk through the door. But the third time, I didn't need anything to walk through the door. I wanted to walk through the door, and I felt like I needed to be there. And before I knew it, I didn't need to take that medication anymore. And I felt strong enough to go. And I know it was God, it was therapy, it was medication, it was the sun, getting out and not isolating anymore. There were a lot of things, but the most important one of those was surrendering to God, because I felt one day, I literally felt like God was telling me, I've got it from here. Because I've always tried to, even as a Christian, I've always tried to be in control. And funny enough, I was diagnosed with OCD, and control is something that I need because I'm too afraid to let go sometimes. And I can get mixed up in my own thoughts and think that my ways are better. They're not. And the more I try to do it my way, the more I suffer. And so I let go, and I gave it to God, and I surrendered it to Him. But the crazy thing is, I would pick it back up because I was anxious, because I was scared, because I was doubting. And then I'd have to surrender it again and surrender it again. And I remember my therapist saying, surrender it every day. Surrender it 100 times a day. It doesn't matter. You pick it back up, you put it back down. At some point, you're going to surrender it, and you're not going to pick it back up. And that's exactly what happened. I surrendered it to God, and since then, I will say that a year ago, on Christmas Day, I would say that was the worst day of my life. And I even took a picture of myself that day because I was hysterically crying all day long. And it's almost Christmas and I'm like, life is so good and I'm okay and I'm alive. My kids are healthy. Like everything that I thought had been destroyed, everything that I thought I was about to lose is still here and we're good. And it took the hardest time of my life for me to stop straddling that line, to stop being a lukewarm Christian. Today, my life looks drastically different because I know Jesus. I read my Bible every single day. And not only that, I actually study the Bible. I know that the Bible can answer every single question that I could ever have. And life isn't always going to be easy, but we are equipped to handle it, not by our own strength, but through Christ who strengthens us. His strength, not ours. And we have to put on our armor. And let me tell you, knowing the word of God is our best defense. And so I study the Bible as if it's the best book in the world. Spoiler alert, it actually is. And knowing his word is so empowering. I don't have to ask people, oh, what does it say? I don't know why I never thought to myself, I can do this. I can look this up. I can read. I can study. I like to go through and look at different translations. I like the NLT Bible because it's like the super easy version, but I also like to see what other versions say. So I actually have the Bible app that my church actually created. So I look at the King James Version and I like to look at the NIV version. But I compare those things. I study the word. I do my devotional. I pray, and I don't just pray a simple prayer. I will pray on my hands and knees. I will prayer walk this house. I have put oil on my kids. I consider myself a prayer warrior now. I'm praying. My life feels and looks different, and I think that anyone who comes in contact with me will leave better because of the love and light of Christ that's coming through me now. I think that my life and my home has drastically changed. My husband too. Oh my goodness, my husband's walk with the Lord this year has been the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. And I think that we both kind of straddled that line for a while of like being lukewarm. And then we just got to a place where we're like, we surrender it. And yeah, so a year ago, I was questioning if my family would be better off without me. And today, I know that I am irreplaceable. And God has completely transformed my heart. And I found a home at Life Church. And not only that, I signed up to serve. So I've been serving for a little over a month in hospitality. Because the first couple of weeks when I would go and I was super anxious, they have like a free coffee station with snacks and all of that. And I was so isolated that every time I went up to get like coffee, the people there would have small talk with me, and I secretly loved it because I felt so lonely. And so that's what helped me decide to do that. So now I'm on the hospitality team. So now if you ever go, you will see me there and I will greet you. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. And I don't know. So just for fun, what I'm reading in the Bible right now is Romans 14. Thank you, Stav, because that scripture, that chapter I love it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this and just got to know me a little bit better. And I love you guys and thank you for being here.